Ms. Whitworth, welcome. Thank you for coming to join us, and we're gonna take a little bit of your time and ask you some questions about curriculum. Please just take a minute, introduce yourself, tell what you teach, where you teach, give us a little bit of background.
My name is Rebecca Whitworth. I teach 5th grade at Bryan, and I've been here almost 20 years. I teach science and social studies 3 times a day as we team up, we're semi-departmentalized, and then language arts to my homeroom.
Okay, everybody's gonna take a second and ask you a question. We'll just go around the table. So how do you integrate standards across the academic disciplines? Like, for example, how do you do reading objectives with your science and social studies, that kind of thing?
We do plan. We have grade level planning times where we can get together. So I work with the reading teacher. We talk about strategies and things that we do. We do a lot of close reading in science and social studies. We integrate vocabulary and vocabulary instruction. So because I've taught reading for a long time before I did just science and social studies, it is just kind of a natural thing.
Just your experience?
Yes.
All right, sounds good.
Well, how do you make sure that you cover and adhere to what the state standards are asking you to teach?
Our county has pacing guides that we follow. And then of course we use the course of study as we plan our lessons. We have check sheets that we check off, we covered this standard. Especially like with our MSTI kits, those standards are kind of grouped. So that kit might cover 4 or 5, standards within that. And so we just keep a checklist and document through lesson plans and use pacing guides to make sure that all of that kind of falls suit and falls in place.
Thank you.
Okay, are teachers involved in any curriculum decisions?
To some extent, when the county is going to adopt a new program, they do choose at least one person from that school, or if it's a wide band of grade levels, they might choose a K2 and a 3-5 person to sit on a committee to listen to the proposed programs, reading, math, science, whatever. And so we do get to attend those meetings and put our input, make votes, and as far as that goes. And then, of course, we do add to the curriculum that we're given, so we have some flexibility in that if we feel like some things do not necessarily meet our standards 100%, like the company sold us on, then of course we do have the ability to reach out and pull and get what we need to.
Well, I know
meet
it's been a
those.
while since we've had to adopt something because it's been pushed, but I know, Teresa, you have been on one before, so don't you usually go and then you bring it back to us, and usually we have a sample set and we get to look at, and then like we basically tell you which one we want, and that's our vote. Isn't that how?
Yes,
isn't that
and
how
then every school gets a vote as to which curriculum, and then that's presented to the board to which one the schools would like to have.
Yeah, I've only sat on one. I did social studies a few years ago, and I think it was very specific just to 5th grade, because I think you guys as 4th grade didn't even get new curriculum when I went. So ours was not as extensive as what Teresa did with math or reading, because it was more limited to 5th grade.
Yeah, okay.
How do you assess instructional programs, activities, and materials that you are considering using in your classroom?
We work together as a team. Our 5th grade is pretty close knit, and we kind of coordinate with one another. Again, you go back to that course of study, you look and see specifically what the standard is asking. And I have found several people, Teachers Pay Teachers, who do a phenomenal job, and I know that they strictly hit our standards. Like the NGSS science standards, if they are NGSS, our state standard is specifically aligned to that. So I know I can look towards those people because they're following the national standards. And so that's sort of where I go on my own. And then, like I said, we collaborate as a grade level and talk with one another. And do you agree? Do you think this really hits the standard? Are we seeing this the same way? So collaboration is a big part of it too.
How do you use diagnostic tools to assess, identify, and support instructional improvement?
We, of course, use Global Scholar as a school at the beginning of the school year, mid-year, and at the end of the year to assess as we've gone along well, or we've used it in the past, don't know what this year might bring. But then also we use, just pre-test, pre-assessments within the classroom. You poll the kids, you know, you have discussions, you know, about a science concept, maybe something that a misconception, and you take what you're given with that to move forward, to drive your instruction if, you know, you need to go this way or this way, depending on what the kids already think or know from their background knowledge.
So it sounds like some of that is observation and questioning. It's you circulating among the students and observing and listening to their discussions so that you can glean what they understand and what they don't understand.
Right.
Which
And
is
it-
more informal, but that still is.
Right, and it does change from day to day, and it can change from class to class. One class might see something totally different than another group that I have. You know, just because we're all fifth grade, we're all studying the same thing, it can still vary from class to class. So what one group might see as a challenge or an issue, the other group, they move on and it's something totally different. So it is a constant, it's daily
Right.
throughout the day. It's not just one big assessment, not one thing that's done once and you move on. It is a constant process throughout teaching and your class.
Well, and with doing hands-on stuff in science, you know, you might have one group that gets the experiment, you know, they get out of it what they're supposed to. Some kids realize that some others may not be successful at all. And then whatever your goal was at the end, you may have reached in one and not. I know I'm just sitting here thinking what a different ball game it is for science as opposed to reading. We've got fluency checks, we've got, you know, those kind of things that we've got
Yes.
different parts, but it's
Very specific assessments
Yes.
that we do
right,
not
and
have.
same thing in math, so that's gonna be, that
Well,
would be,
then I'm sitting here thinking, so if they can't measure 10 milliliters of water and they don't get the result that you needed out of whatever the science experiment was, that's gonna impact. Well, it's maybe it's because you didn't measure 10 milliliters of water. You see this,
Right.
and you don't go above, you get that exact measurements can really affect.
And some groups, it just depends on the dynamic of the group. You might have stronger math kids in this group or
Right,
stronger
yeah.
reading kids in this
Mhm.
group. And so their ability to read and interpret, or their ability to do mathematical equations, measurements, you
Right.
know, it does make a difference.
Right.
So,
or if they've worked, like I know we do a electricity study, and one year I had a student who his dad was an electrician, he had
a lot of
done-
background.
so buddy, he was knocking, you know, well, I was having to, you know, he was giving all the answers like he knew so much because of what he could bring to the table,
So I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of times with science and social studies, and a lot of people probably don't think of it as important as reading and math, but we don't have specific, you know, pre-assessments where this is gonna tell us where you are,
Mhm.
because your knowledge can be all over depending on your background.
Right.
And what you bring to the table, so it is different with every class, and it's a constant, it's constantly changing. What I'm seeing, and I'm like, oh, we need to talk about this, or this is something we need to look at more closely, it will vary from group to group.
Right. Okay. How has the infusion of technology into the classroom impacted the curriculum in our district, our school, or your classroom?
I mean, at times, technology can be a huge blessing. We have Google Classroom, we can make assignments, kids can log on. We have the Chromebooks that can read aloud passages to kids. So we have a lot of good with that, but also when the technology is gone for the day, or gone for the week, or gone for the school year till you have the money to replace it, it also brings even more difficult challenges because you've grown dependent on it. Your
Right.
kids have grown dependent on it.
You've learned to
And
rely on it,
you've
and then
planned
all of a sudden
lessons
it's
around
not
it.
there.
And then
Yeah, right.
your Elmo does not work anymore, and there is no technology budget right now, like to replace that.
We've all been there.
Yeah, or the Wi-Fi is out for the day, or the Wi-Fi is out for the week, it's the realities of it. Technology is not a perfect world. It's great when it's there, it's horrible when it's not.
And so
Something
you've
as
learned how
simple
to
as a
rely on
bulb blowing.
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
And just the time it takes, because every one of us in our school, we are not all equipped with 100% the exact same technology. So if our bulb blows, we don't have replacements just sitting there on a shelf. it is a time lapse.
Well,
and
then you move
it's-
into a classroom management issue, because then you've lost the kids.
Yes.
Because they're waiting for you to get it to work or up
And
and
you're,
running.
you're shifting gears
Yeah.
to change your instruction to make it work, and, I mean, it is a management, it is a problem, so.
I was also thinking about the difference between a fifth grader and a kindergarten or first grader with that technology, because by the time they get to you in fifth grade, they're pretty adept at
Yes.
using the
Yes.
technology.
Yeah.
But in the younger grades that you guys teach, you could spend so much time trying to get kids even to use technology that it probably doesn't have quite the same impact as it has at a
Right.
different grade.
And so I am fortunate because most of the time, they've had the experiences, they know, a lot of times they know more than I do. I mean, that's just kids, and it's the truth.
Yeah.
They pick up on things and they're faster to get in than adults are.
What are the greatest difficulties of your position, and what are some factors that interfere with you achieving goals and objectives?
Probably the greatest difficulty on a daily basis, probably classroom attendance. We struggle with that, and you have kids who are consistently absent. You have, especially teaching hands-on science, you have kids that miss the experiment. And so they come in the next day when you're talking about the results and what you might change and what you might do differently to make your parachute more effective so it falls more slowly. Well, they missed testing parachutes the day before. So attendance and them not having the ability to see, oh, this is what we did yesterday, I can take this and I can move forward with it, they are at a disadvantage. And that's frustrating.
Mhm.
It's hard for them, it's hard for us as teachers.
And, with attendance, there is a new House Bill 388, which pertains to reading. The end of third grade, they don't get to move on to fourth grade. How do you feel about that?
I know, I've never taught younger grades. I've worked, reading intervention wise, I've worked with younger students, but I know how important content is and being able to read content material. And I see that it's a struggle with my fifth graders, and I have to look for material oftentimes that's on a lower reading level just to get my content across. So kids who have such difficulties with reading are at a true disadvantage when they get to science and social studies, because the content gets so far above their head and they're trying to read something on a first or second grade level. The content level and the reading level are never gonna match up, and they're missing the boat, they're missing out on that. So I think reading is extremely important to be able to move on in the content areas.
Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Thanks for answering our questions. I think we are good. Anybody have anything you want to add? It's not necessary. But I think our discussion was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. We've got a couple of questions to ask you, but first I'd like to have you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background.
I'm Christy Hamilton. I'm the principal of Bryan Elementary School here in Jefferson County. I actually went to school here myself, so this school is kind of near and dear to my heart. I have worked in Jacksonville City Schools, Calhoun County Schools, and Jefferson County Schools, and I also worked for Alabama Reading Initiative for 8 years.
Well, we've all got a series of questions. We'll just kind of go around the table and ask you one at a time. So the first question is, how do you lead and motivate teachers to adhere to those prescribed state standards we all deal with?
And one thing that I try to do here is we try to have a faculty meeting at least monthly, and we have some meetings on the front end. We have grade level meetings, and in those meetings, we kind of look at the district standard practices, which are expectations from Jefferson County, and we'll go over those. We also have walkthrough practices, from Jefferson County, so that's the first thing, usually where I want to start, is kind of lay out the expectations, not only from the central office level, but the expectations I have for our students and our teachers here. One thing that I try to do, if you really want to focus on teaching and learning, I feel like you've got to make that, presence known in the classroom, so I try to visit classrooms. Not really to catch anybody doing anything, just to see what's going on in the classrooms and how I can better support those teachers and the students, because we want everyone to make growth.
And as a teacher, I kind of respect that. I've never felt like a got you situation when you walked in the room. But my question is this, are teachers involved in any curriculum decisions?
Yes. Again, here, we try to bring the grade levels together to have discussions. We meet monthly in PST and specifically discuss specific students and strategies that we can utilize. I've tried to utilize our district specialists, our math and our reading people to come in and us sit down as a grade level or as a faculty and look at where we are and where we need to go.
Okay, how do you assess instructional programs, activities, and materials?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, going into the classroom, seeing what's going on, what kind of activities are going on. You know, if I see, and when I go in, I see just a small snapshot. I'm only in there 5-10 minutes. So if I see somebody doing a worksheet, you know, I don't cringe, but if every time I go in there, that's all they're doing is a worksheet, then that tells me, okay, we kind of need to reevaluate and see what we need to do. Doing walkthroughs, having other administrators come in and kind of give us some feedback so that we can grow as a school.
How do you use diagnostic tools to assess, identify, and support instructional improvement? And are teachers involved?
Yes, we do involve teachers and we try to look at data frequently. We use, our summative data to look at. We also use formative assessments that we want to look at, and that just kind of helps us keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the school. And then also when we have our PST meetings, looking at data for specific students.
How has the infusion of technology into the classroom impacted the curriculum at our district or school?
I think that within the curriculum using technology, I think that's where we're really gonna see some change over the next year with the pandemic and everybody having to kind of pivot and make some adjustments in instruction. We were already utilizing technology in the classroom. You would see teachers use things like Kahoot and, other websites to help engage kids and help them, but since we've kind of had that downtime and kind of really had to look at virtual learning, I think it's really gonna change, you know, our course of action in the future.
The next question piggybacks off of that. It's also about technology. Has technology and the transition to online virtual learning been a catalyst for curriculum changes?
I think so. And again, we're looking at different things, and right now, we're looking at how are we gonna handle the fall? What's the fall gonna look like? Giving parents a virtual option for those people that don't feel comfortable, but yet we don't wanna pile something else on teachers, so the virtual option, it'll be a totally separate virtual school where somebody else will handle all that, where here we'll handle just the face-to-face interaction, and if we have to shut down, we will do it again like we did, with the previous shutdown, is just handle our kids from our classroom.
You know, thinking about that, not just with the virtual learning, but I'm thinking about like the last time we adopted that reading series, they started to embed and give us more technology opportunities, you know, some online, you know, where it would read the stories to them. It had, you know, like, so it's funny when you look back over, you know, I've been 20 years teaching to see how the technology has kind of been trickling in more and more, even with the adoption, right, when we adopt new curriculum and stuff, even before we even, you know, were forced into it.
Well, and I've even been looking this summer at some options. What are some things maybe I need to purchase for the entire school to make it learn easier for students and teachers if we have to go online? So I've looked at products like IXL, which is math, and it's got outlined the Alabama state standards.
Yes, I
You can
use
go
that.
in, you can assign standards to kids that they need to work on. So I think that's coming. I mean, we've seen some of that, but I think with this shutdown with the coronavirus that we're gonna see more and more of that. And we may have a shift of kids going to more virtual, which of course we know around here, we have the issue of childcare and people have to work. So we've gotta have something, you know, for those kids that come face to face.
That and internet access,
yeah.
is such an issue. We have such trouble with that, so yeah.
What are the greatest difficulties of your position, and what factors interfere with you achieving the goals you've set?
I try to focus on teaching and learning because to me, that's the most important thing. We're here to make sure that our students make progress. It's all the other stuff that interferes, buses, if it snows, an early dismissal. It's just all the extra stuff, maintenance. And a lot of times when you think about going into administration, I mean, I never thought that I'd be out on a service road wading through raw sewage, or dealing with things of that nature
Right.
that I've had to deal with.
That doesn't, not really directly tied to instruction and teaching, but that,
Right.
yeah, but you still have to
You
deal with
walk
it.
in the gym right now, there's buckets sitting in the floor from where it's rained all last week. So there's all the other stuff that kind of interferes.
Through this class, we've had to do some reading and some research, and we had a Zoom last night, and we had a discussion about the new bill. And so which led us to add this question, through our discussion, was, how do you feel about the House Bill 388, which is the new reading legislation pertaining to third graders not being able to advance to fourth grade if they're not being found proficient in reading? And then also, how do you feel like that's gonna impact our children and students?
Well, I think, it holds us accountable, not that we weren't accountable already, but it really makes us focus in the lower grades and make sure that we're sending those kids up. We know that early intervention, the earlier we can intervene, the better, and the less amount of time it takes to close that gap. But then again, you have things interfere, like we were talking earlier, how are we gonna really implement this, with a shutdown and, the various things that happen occasionally. So you have to really look at that. And I think too, you have to look at the kids, as we were talking earlier about the House bill, there are some exceptions to it, but, you've gotta look at the child. Sometimes it's not in the best interest of the child to hold them back. If it's not really gonna make a difference for them,
Right.
why would we just hold them back?
Right.
Because they haven't met that benchmark.
Well, do you think because of this that there may end up eventually with like us getting some extra support to help with, cause I'm thinking, especially third grade, like we had some extra interventionists or extra reading coaches that could come in for the time, cause I'm just thinking about the time, we know how important the one-on-one or small group is,
Right.
but there's only so much that one teacher can do that maybe the county, or the state would put in maybe some extra funds for extra people, or I don't know, what do you think could be extra support that we could get?
Possibly, and I even had an extra half unit that I made Miss Berry from a part-time to a full-time, so we'll have 2 full-time interventionists this upcoming school year, which you think a half-time, really wouldn't be that much, but being the size that we are,
Right.
it takes every little bit, to address those kids, because they do pull them in small group and individual to give them that little extra push.
And I was wondering about the new curriculum that has been adopted for phonics in the lower grades. Do you see that new curriculum is making a difference, so that when we actually get started with that this year, that we'll already be a step ahead, or is?
I think it will make a difference with some kids. Some kids just don't learn that way. But that's where you can pull them back to the table and do, tier 2 interventions. So overall, we were looking for something to help solidify those foundational skills, and I think that's a good start.
Well, I wanna thank you for your time, or I should say, we would like to thank you for your time today, and we thank you again for your continued support. We appreciate you just taking time out of your day to answer these questions for us, and,
Well, I appreciate y'all, and I'm very proud of all of you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, it's very sweet.